Don Jr. was talking about how, the foreign leaders don't respect us. Our adversaries don't respect us. China, is like we're being attacked by hackers, and China is blah, blah, blah. Okay. This is probably, I saw the top of this. China's worst nightmare has arrived, says, hold on, I have to bring this up. Says ex-Reagan Security Council Director. China's worst nightmare has arrived, says ex-Reagan Security Council Director. This is on Maria Bartiromo's show. This is not an episode from when Trump was president. Check out what's going on here. This is kind of amazing. I'm stunned. I mean, do you think she had to down a bottle of wine immediately before and after this segment? Watch.
China right now. The Senate passed the newly named Innovation and Competition Act yesterday. 68.
Which, by the way, is part of Biden's infrastructure package. Just for the record, remember he was talking about we need this infrastructure stuff to fund our industries. So we got to fund development. That's part of the infrastructure package, right? This is, and day before yesterday, I was like, they're passing parts of it a la carte on there. And this is one of those things. This is we're not spending enough on R&D. We're not protecting our R&D, all that kind of stuff. That's a big chunk of it. They passed this enormous bill. It goes back to the House. It's going to get passed. It will get signed. It's going to go through. There you go.
68 to 32.
68 to 32. Let's see. Can I do? I know I don't. Let's see. Innovation, oops, and Competition Act votes. Okay. Freedom Works. Let's see. Key vote. Let's see. Pass the bill to kind of. Okay. By the way. Freedom Works, let's see, yeah. I finally. Despite the interval, change the touch on key history, Jeff Bezos, this is pretty fascinating. The Freedom Works was urging Republicans to vote no on this. And I think, let's see if roll call has the yays and the nays on here, or the vast majority of them. Passed, let's see, 6832 bipartisan legislation aimed at the legislation sponsored by Chuck Schumer and Todd Young of Indiana. Began as a targeted funding boost to help the National Security Science Foundation study artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and advanced energy, but grew over weeks on the Senate floor to include a new funding and numerous China-related policy provisions. This is part of the infrastructure package they've already pushed. So in the end, when you see that, by the way, when you see the number for infrastructure coming down in the negotiations, you can tack on this stuff. Legislation authorizes $81 billion for NSF over the next, the National Science Foundation over the next 5 fiscal cycles, including $29 billion for a new directorate, as well as $17 billion for the Energy Department, $17.5 billion for the Pentagon's Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA. That'll trigger a lot of the right-wingers. And it also appropriates $52 billion in subsidies for the struggling U.S. semiconductor industry. The bill includes several key, research security provisions, including a requirement that the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, known as CFIUS, review foreign contributions to U.S. colleges and universities over $1 million. That's combating China's influence in academia. That's been a concern for a while. There was no bill that contained this stuff in it during the Trump years, just saying. The bill also set criminal penalties for researchers who failed to disclose foreign support for their projects and bolsters the State Department's ability to deny suspicious visa applications for researchers interested in sensitive technologies. It's basically an anti-spying provision. Speaking on the Senate floor on Tuesday, Schumer called the legislation a statement of faith in America's ability to seize the opportunities of the 21st century. This is something the Biden administration has been working directly with Schumer on and getting it. Yeah, so the bill's prospects for becoming law are murky. The White House has expressed support, but the House companion bill has yet to advance. It's going to pass. That was written before this. So Here you go.
It focuses on technology, innovation, and research. In order to counter the threat from China, it now heads to the House. But even more important than this is President Biden's executive order last week concerning the so-called blacklist of companies.
I'm sorry, what? I'm sorry, what was more important?
Executive order. Even more important than this is President Biden's executive order.
What did you say, Maria Bartiromo?
Even more important than this is President Biden's executive order last week concerning the so-called blacklist of companies.
And how are we going to define President Biden's executive order? What is the best way to describe it? China's worst nightmare has arrived. That's what they're talking about in the title of this video. Can you imagine Maria Bartiromo, who still, by the way, was pushing the big lie up until weeks ago, it now has to admit that it's the Biden administration pushing back on China in a more direct and succinct way than any other. You will get to it. It's fascinating.
Investing in Chinese companies. Joining me right now to discuss all of this is former Senior Director of International Economic Affairs at the Reagan National Security Council. He is the former chairman of the Congressional U.S.-China Economic and Security Review Commission, Roger Robinson Jr. Roger, it's great to have you back. Thanks very much for being here this morning. I've got President Biden's executive order here from last Thursday.
Do you now? I guess it's terrible for America. I guess this is the because of all the money that the Bidens apparently got from China, that this is somehow So I'm sure you'll tell us it's awful and that all it does is bend over for China, right?
And I want to get your take on this. Does it have teeth? First, assess how important this tool is for the U.S. in terms of its pushback on bad behavior from communist China.
Okay, yeah. Assess. Listen to what she just asked for before you listen to what he says. Assess its its full value.
U.S. in terms of its pushback on bad behavior from communist China.
Yeah.
We have the wherewithal in this country to either approve or not investing in Chinese companies that are tied to the Chinese military. Your thoughts on that tool?
Yeah, your thoughts on that tool that are in the Biden executive order. Executive order on addressing the threat of securities investments and finance certain companies of the People's Republic of China. June 3rd, 2021. This is it. This is the one she's holding in her hand. The one that starts with I, Joseph R. Biden Jr., President of the United States of America. Find that additional steps are necessary to address the national emergency declared in Executive Order 13959 of November 12, 2020, addressing the threat from securities investments that finance communist Chinese military companies, including the threat posed by military-industrial complex of the People's Republic of China and its involvement in military intelligence. So it goes further. It goes further than a similar one last year. And it adds some crucial parts to it. Parts that could have been added last year, but were magically left out.
Well, I think, Maria, that this is arguably the most powerful and fearsome policy tool in America's non-military arsenal.
Well, all right. Well, there you go. There's just in case you were wondering if you needed anything to kind of push back on the idea that Biden is going to turn over, and go belly up for all of our adversaries overseas. Honestly, understand Maria Bartiromo having this dude on to talk about the executive order, not the bill that passed. He's not talking about that. He's talking about this. I mean, there's stuff in the bill as well that they're going to discuss. Holy shit!
This is a worse nightmare for China.
Really? Because I thought that Hunter Biden had taken trillions from the country and billions of dollars, and they left, and that couldn't be done unless there was a quid pro, and there must have been something. Oh yeah.
In the sense that it's escaped for 2 decades now.
2 decades, and that's been going on. And who's president when the worst nightmare bill shows up? Who was it? I just blitz it. Honestly.
Any focus on the money? Trade, yes. Technology, certainly. But where has been the fact that over that 20 years, there's been a multi-trillion-dollar flow, a kind of free lunch program that...
By the way, this guy's voice is totally relaxing, and I don't feel condescended to at all.
It's defied regulation.
I understand.
And diligence, and screening. We didn't even know who was in our markets, and found to our chagrin that there were a number of corporate national security and human rights abusers.
Oh, did we?
Many of them even already sanctioned by the United States, that are in the portfolios of well over 100 million unwitting American retail investors today. So we have now an immense new source of leverage. And it's something that...
Really? Just now? That's weird. Really? I mean, I thought Trump was, he felt differently after COVID, and the trade deal, he wasn't that excited about it anymore.
Needs to be used, and I think that all to the good that we finally arrived.
Listen to the tone in this. This is on Fox Business, talking about an executive order that Biden signed and a bill that the Democrats pushed through, that the only people who voted against it were Republicans. And FreedomWorks pushed back against this bill. Understand that these two elements together especially are crucial. And listen to how this guy is describing their value in pushing back against the military industrial complex of China and its ascension economically by having these military companies disguised as other companies in our stock market so that people have them in their portfolio, and then they get money from from Americans who wouldn't support that kind of thing. Like, you're against how the Uyghurs are treated and that kind of thing, and you wouldn't want to invest in companies that are related to the government and other stuff, but you don't know that some of these companies are, and you weren't allowed to know, and now you are, and there's a direct rule they can now use to purge these companies from the stock market. And it didn't exist before. Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. is the president when it's done, and he's the dude that did it. And Trump who?
Well, this is really important because when you invest in companies that are tied to the Chinese military, you are funding the expansion of the Chinese military.
Right.
And its plans to overtake the United States. You heard President Biden the other day say China believes it's going to overtake the U.S. within 15 years. Do we want to be paying and funding for that expansion of the Chinese military? President Trump tried to put the law down that you could not invest in any Chinese companies tied to the Chinese military.
Yeah, if they had 50%, and you saw all these companies drop 1% and snake out.
With this blacklist. Assess what President Biden did last week.
Yeah, what's the difference?
Expanded this blacklist on U.S. investment in Chinese companies, a policy originally started under President Trump. 59 companies with ties to China's military or its surveillance industry will be banned from American investments beginning on August 2nd, Roger. But there are...
Yeah, banned in entirety, not because they're exactly 50% or 51%, I think is what they actually had. It had to be less than 51%.
There are some loopholes here, and I want to go through them because everybody knows I'm very skeptical of the CCP. Assess what we're talking about.
Yeah, unlike everyone else in the world, I'm a little skeptical. More, most people aren't. Most people take what the CCP says at face value.
Order.
Well, what you just mentioned in terms of the addition of surveillance technology sector.
I'm sorry, what?
What you just mentioned in terms of the addition of surveillance technology sector.
What did they add? What did the Biden
What you just mentioned in terms of the addition of surveillance technology sector.
Oh, that
as
part,
one of the criteria to appear on the OFAC list is a big deal because Because that advances tremendously our human rights policy in China.
Right.
And elsewhere around the world, precedentially. So I just want to underscore that that was a part of, I think, a net strengthening that took place here. Obviously,
yeah, adding an entire sector of businesses specifically that were skirting outside of it, that were dealing with technology, and
capital market sanctions of President Trump were preserved, but also expanded. Now, now, it's not to say that this is going to be an easy haul or a perfect picture. For example, the Pentagon has been basically excised from the process. The so-called Pentagon PLA list, as I used to call it, Section 1237, has gone away in terms of being able to trigger capital market sanctions. So now it's just the Treasury OFAC list, the Office of Foreign Asset Control. Now, that is a very potent sanction and list, as it were. It's probably the most feared. But at the same time, it is run by the Treasury Department, and they have, in the past at least, tended to be too alert and responsive to Wall Street's concerns here on loopholes and various fine print, shall we say. I think that in this...
Well, that's why in the executive order, it goes from the whole like 50% control to these companies are gone.
I get the impression that that Wall Street grip on Treasury, however, has weakened considerably, and I think it's proven in the nature of the announcement last Thursday.
You think?
Right.
But
well, we know that there are many...
But there's more.
Wall Streeters that are trying to push other Chinese companies to invest in. I'm talking about people like BlackRock, Larry Fink, Bridgewater, Ray Dalio, all the big investors who want to invest.
Yeah, BlackRock, who's buying up American homes for cash right now because they can't go through these other arms.
China, Goldman Sachs, who want to invest in these companies. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are about, number one, the Treasury in charge of this list, the Treasury getting bullied by some of these Wall Street firms. And also there's this old executive order, or the old executive order from Trump automatically had 50% or more owned subsidiaries that appeared on the Pentagon list. And I also see that there is one issue that I want to talk to you about, the fact that there were 5 companies that were on the initial list, did not make it on this new list. Are there ways to get around this? The subsidiaries of these large companies, can investors invest there? Are there ways that Wall Street is...
This is where Fox is trying to figure out a way, like, can we skirt these things and still put money into these companies, even though we're pretending to like what Biden wants to do?
Keep their claws in these companies and keep their investors investing in companies in China that are tied to the military. In your view, Roger?
Well, that's a multifaceted question, but let me start with Treasury and then move to the subsidiaries, because you've hit on something terribly important there. As far as the Treasury Department, they've had to look to themselves to think about what is the alternative to the fateful imposition of robust capital market sanctions against Chinese corporate national security and human rights abusers. I mean, protecting Wall Street fees and CCP's interests, as opposed to our national security fundamental values and scores of millions of at-risk American retail investors. It's not a very appetizing choice. I think it's very stark. I think they woke up and smelled the proverbial coffee here, and I think that that's why we had a better than expected announcement last Thursday.
What? A better than a what? A better what?
I think that that's why we had a better than expected announcement last Thursday.
What announcement? What was the announcement last Thursday? What was announced last Thursday? What was the could somebody tell me what was announced last Thursday that could possibly? All right.
As far as the subsidiaries are concerned, you're quite right that in the previous executive order 13959 of the previous administration, you had automaticity in the sense that 50% or more.
That's a lovely word, automaticity. I'm a fan.
Owned subsidiaries of listed companies were automatically added to the list. Now, that's not the case now. provision was deleted. Now you have to have the subsidiaries placed individually on the list. Now that opens the door to concerns because a number of these corporate bad actors in China, the holding companies, the parent companies, aren't publicly traded. I mean, the way they fund themselves is through public subsidiaries. So if you start playing fast and loose with subsidiaries, you could be undermining fundamentally this entire exercise. That's a great concern. It's going to require real vigilance on the part of the outside folks, like myself and others, who are going to make book on this routinely.
Yes, there will be people whose job it is to make sure that those companies are removed.
Why were 5 companies dropped from the list? You are also wondering this. Some of the companies were dropped, and they were also on the entities list. So is anybody playing fast and loose with this by dropping certain companies off that list so they don't face sanctions?
Well, we don't know yet, Maria. I mean, this is still a very new thing. I will say that the administration has claimed that they're going to start adding to the list very soon. I think the proof is in the proverbial pudding there. So we'll see.
So we'll see. That must have been one of the most painful segments that Maria Bartiromo ever had to do. Just admitting that the Biden administration has done, and I quote Fox News, that they have provided China's worst nightmare, according to Fox News and an ex-Reagan Security Council director. And that they got better than expected news about controlling Chinese investment in, via the stock market in Biden's EO and in the bill that passed in the Senate just yesterday. So that in and of itself, I mean, that's amazing.